Alright, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to We Ain't Got No Histories post-match live after this semi-disappointing Community Shield experience. Everybody likes to win, I suppose. Nobody likes to lose. And, but yeah, in the end, it's still just a friendly. So we're going to talk about this for a little bit as soon as I get everything properly set up here. As always, unprepared. Much like Chelsea in the first 15 minutes today. Rather all over the place. So, 2017 Community Shield is a rematch of the 2015 experience, which Chelsea also lost, although not on a penalty kick shootout. This time, final score was 1-1, with Chelsea taking the lead about 49 seconds into the second half, courtesy of Victor Moses, and Arsenal equalizing through their new signing, Sead Kolasinac, in the 82nd minute after Pedro was somewhat harshly, in my opinion, sent off. Maybe even if you say it wasn't a harsh sending off, it was certainly an inconsistent refereeing job from old Bobby Madley, who ignored similar tackles from Hector Bellerin, only to give a red to Pedro. There are conflicting reports whether this ban carries over to the Premier League. Theoretically shouldn't, because even though many people don't like to call this a friendly, it's just a friendly as per FA rules. And as we saw with Ivanovic getting a red card and not being suspended in 2012, was it, against Manchester City, and we saw with Victor Moses this year, where he's eligible to play today but not eligible to play next weekend against Burnley. Suspensions should not be carrying over between the Community Shield and the Premier League. So Pedro should be available. There was one thing that people were saying: if it's a straight red card, then he gets a one-match ban. I haven't seen this confirmed anywhere. They did mention it on the telecast, but it wouldn't be the first time Martin Tyler and company would be wrong about something. So if Pedro is suspended, I suppose that gives a chance to Charlie Musonda, which the youngster also got today later on in the second half as a late third substitute for Chelsea. The commentator said it doesn't carry over. Okay, well, when I was listening, Martin Tyler was saying that it does carry over because it is a straight red, and then which conflicted with everything I know, and then conflicted with later Twitter reports. So I don't know. I don't think it does. I suppose we'll find out soon enough. In the end, we should be able to beat Burnley with or without Pedro. But probably a nicer, easier time if we do have Pedro and Willian to play next weekend. So anyway, let's get with the starting lineups here. For some reason, this doesn't want to load. Nothing's working. What is happening here? Back to the drawing board, says Kyle. That's a bit overreactionary. We are here to talk about how friendlies don't necessarily matter, at least in terms of results. I don't think we should be... A, it was a draw, and it was a stupid penalty shootout. B, it's just preseason. They try to build it up as a Community Shield. Sack Conte, says Chris. There you go. We've achieved the peak overreaction already. So now we can move on to the coping business. There was a stat earlier that the winner of the Community Shield hasn't won the Premier League in like 5 years, something like that. I may be making up the 5-year part, but it does not correlate at all to who wins the league. So yeah, it doesn't. There's nothing. There's no consequence. There's no indication. There's no. Doesn't count for the season. And the trial of the ABBA penalties is a bit. Was not too impressed by that format. I don't quite understand what they're trying to achieve by it. But it was kind of weird. So I guess the Arsenal wins four penalties to 1, which is also weird, but whatever. Robin says it's since 2010. So there you go. Last 8 winners of the Community Shield have not gone on to win the Premier League. So sorry, Arsenal. Not that I don't think anybody was tipping them for winning the Premier League, but anyway, let's quickly talk about the game itself or lineups before everybody starts talking about how it's been the worst summer of all time and the squad is terrible and etc. etc. So goalkeeper Thibaut Courtois, back 3 of Gary Cahill, your captain, David Luiz and Cesar Azpilicueta. Left wing back Alonso, right wing back Victor Moses, Fabregas and Conte in the middle, and then a front 3 of Pedro, Batshuayi, and Willian. Chelsea certainly didn't start the game well at all. At about 15 minutes, where everybody was all at sea, even Azpilicueta was making mistakes. So when Dave starts making mistakes, you know it's a bad time. But about after the first 15, Chelsea kind of survived that initial onslaught. Arsenal certainly came out of the blocks really, really strongly. Plenty of vim and vigor about their play. Lots of effort closing down, etc., etc. And after that, Chelsea improved, and I'd say even finished the half the stronger of the two teams. Certainly after Per Mertesacker was forced to go off with a gash on his head. Thanks to Gary Cahill's sharp elbows, into which the big Arsenal center half jumped straight into and opened up a big cut on his face, so he had to leave. Unfortunately, the person who came in for Mertesacker is the guy who scored the equalizer, as these things tend to happen sometimes. But Arsenal's back 3 was Mertesacker in the middle, like in the FA Cup final. Monreal and Holding as the 2 wide center halves. Bellerin and Oxlade-Chamberlain were their wingbacks. The middle 2 of Xhaka and El Neni. And then a front 3 of Welbeck, Lacazette, and Iwobi. Was not particularly impressed by Lacazette. I didn't think can't particularly recall anything spectacular he did during the game. He want to say he had an early chance, but otherwise was well marshaled. And when Giroud came on, Arsenal looked a much more credible threat, as that tends to happen. Of course, that's not to say that Lacazette's a bad player. We know he's a good player, a good goal scorer, but we've seen him twice now in 2 preseason games, and he's yet to look great. Of course, there are plenty who are saying that Morata hasn't looked great, although I thought he played pretty well today. There's one particular piece of hold-up play that was really, really nice against one after Chelsea were down to 10, and he held the ball off at like 3 or 4 players around him. So that was really nice from him. Obviously, missing a penalty is not ideal, and he missed one semi-decent chance from a Willian cross, but that's a tough shot with the half bounce off the turf. Depending on how harsh you wanna be on it, he either bottled it or just growing pains as he comes up to fitness. Conte was saying Morata is not quite up to full fitness yet, so it's doesn't really matter if he scores or not in the preseason games. What matters is, does he score in the actual games when it counts. Actually, what truly matters is, does Chelsea win the games when he plays, and how we play overall. But so Chelsea began the second half quite well. Moses, as we said, grabbed the opening goal. It was a nice little semi-moment of vindication for his FA Cup shenanigans. Obviously, the magnitude of the two games is quite different. Certainly, FA Cup far more important than this silly little Community Shield, but it was still nice to see Moses score. Unfortunately, Chelsea couldn't hang on to it. But that second half was a fairly controlled performance, especially after the goal. Chelsea looked fairly comfortable, in control. Arsenal really weren't threatening until Pedro was unfortunately sent off for the final 10 minutes. Chelsea kind of switched off immediately after, and Arsenal equalized on the free kick, the resulting free kick, in fact, thanks to some pretty poor marking in the back, with both Rudiger and Moses marking space, and two Arsenal runners getting a free shot at the goal, and that's how Kolasinac scored. These things happen, I suppose. That's why we play preseason, to iron out these issues. Rudiger did not necessarily look switched on for his 15 minutes. That's also kind of understandable. Defensive substitutions are often harder to get up to the flow of the game or whatever. But with Rudiger, we still again saw the shifts that we saw in preseason so far, with him coming on to play the right center half of the back three, Azpilicueta moving to right wing back as a more defensive option, and then Victor Moses playing left wing back again, as Marcos Alonso could not go the whole game. And if I were to be concerned about one thing, that's probably the biggest thing I'd be concerned about, is Alonso has not been able to complete a preseason game while Moses has played 4 straight 90 minutes. I want to say 3 or 4 straight 90 minutes now. So, there are rumors of Chelsea being linked with center halves or whatever, but really what we're looking at is the left wing back. What do I think of the new penalty system? I'm not a fan of the penalty system, and I'm not really sure what issue it's trying to solve. I guess it's trying to make it fair that one team goes first and then the other team goes first, but instead you end up with a huge, I guess it's trying to take away the advantage of going second, which they say is the better position in the penalty shootout, to go second. And so it's trying to take away that advantage, but instead what it's really creating, and what we saw today, was if one team misses, the other team has a really good chance to grab some actually really even much better momentum than is ever possible in a regular shootout. So at some point it was Arsenal was up 3-1. Was it 3-1? ABBA, right? Anyway, it was not Oh, Michael says the first one has the advantage. Okay, well, I've always read that the second one has the advantage, but maybe it's the first one. Maybe I'm just remembering wrong. And I guess it would make sense that the first has the advantage, since right now it's you go first and fourth, and then you go again. I don't know. I don't want to call it stupid because I don't know enough about it, but on initial impression, it strikes me as something weird that doesn't need to be solved. I mean, penalty kick shootout is not an ideal way to settle anything, but beyond just that concept, there's really nothing wrong with the methods that we're using before. Anyway, ABBA, we lose on that. We lose the karaoke. It happens, which makes it feel like a loss, I suppose. But we should remember that we actually drew the game, which isn't necessarily ideal, but is still better than a loss. And we did all right with 10 men, despite conceding that goal on the set piece. which possibly has nothing to do with 10 men. Possibly does. Who knows? Who knows? Who knows what the marketing schemes were? So Rudiger makes his semi-competitive debut. Kind of a mixed performance from him, in my opinion. Morata makes his semi-competitive debut. I thought he did well, despite the missed penalty. And Charlie Musonda makes his semi-competitive debut for about the last 10 minutes. And he might have a decent role to play with Hazard not expected back for at least another month. Is it true that Conte blocked Neymar transfer at 155 million? No, that's not true. What Conte was saying, because everybody's getting asked about this Neymar transfer, what Conte was saying is, what does he think about this outrageous fee for Neymar? And Conte, of course, talked about his own team in the context of it, and he said we need more signings than one big player at 155 million. We need 3 or 4 players at 40-50 million. So that's what he was saying. Why did Courtois take the penalty when you have Fabregas, Luis, and many more? I would think it's because it's a friendly and nobody cared, but possibly because they wanted to. I don't know. We should remember that Courtois scored one of the greatest penalties you'll ever see in a preseason game, which was the quote-unquote winner against PSG a couple seasons ago. I recommend you look that up somewhere on Twitter or Reddit or wherever. That was one of the hardest hit penalties I've ever seen. And I think he tried to do the same thing today, except he kind of got underneath it and it ballooned over the bar and out of the stadium and into low orbit, where it might circle for the next few years before eventually disintegrating in the atmosphere. So yeah, presumably, as Ben says, penalty takers volunteer. Presumably, some of the guys who necessarily aren't the first choice penalty takers decided to volunteer and try their hand at penalties. Like, I don't think I've ever seen Gary Cahill take a penalty kick, but he did all right. He took a nice penalty. That was good. Yeah, Robin says a goal kick, not a penalty. I think Courtois possibly needed to take a moment and gather himself before deciding to try to launch a goal kick when he should be kicking a penalty. I don't know, it's just the stuff you can laugh about, really. It's a friendly. Who cares? Arsenal won the Shield for like the 3rd time in 4 seasons, and do we really, are we really envious of that? Obviously, Conte and the players should be disappointed because they should be playing every game to win. But as a fan, as taking a result and blowing it out of proportion, that's really not something we should be doing. Who cares? That's what I say. Again, not to be confused with who cares about the performances themselves, but who cares about the result. Because a 1-1 draw and a loss on this ABBA penalty kick shootout, not something that's going to concern me too much, if at all. Like I said, what is concerning me mostly is that Marcos Alonso seems to be unable to complete a 90-minute game at this point, which with the season a week away is a problem, especially since we don't really have an actual backup for him, and Victor Moses has been playing left wing back more regularly lately, I suppose. Kevin says I care, and hey, I mean, if you want to care, go right ahead. Juan Garcia, would you want drink water? On the face of it, we need a 4th midfielder, and I think Drinkwater could do a bang-up job as a 4th midfielder for sure. The problem is he would cost like 40 million. So, do I want the club to spend 40 million on a 4th midfielder? No. I'd much rather give that task to Lewis Baker if Conte is willing to trust Lewis Baker, which doesn't seem to be the case since Lewis Baker was not in the matchday squad today. It was the young American Kyle Scott instead. And Baker looks to be heading out on loan. And to add to that, Conte wasn't playing him in midfield earlier in preseason anyway. So long story short, Baker doesn't seem to be the fourth midfielder option that Conte is trusting. So in that sense, Drinkwater is a steady player, says Ben, and that's a good description. Right? There's a fourth midfielder. There's, somebody to play in the cups and somebody to spell people when we need minutes. If at some point we actually are leading a game, I know that's tough to picture at this moment, but Drinkwater I think would be fine. There's a long tradition of these steady midfielders at Chelsea, some of whom have played a pretty big role in our recent history. Thinking of people like Morelos, Jarošić, Smerton, if you want to go back to like 04, Then there's of course the Steve Sidwells, who we'd rather not talk about, but I'm sure Drinkwater would be better than say old Steve Sidwell, Mineiro, Manish, all these guys. So there's you need squad players, as Conte's made it pretty clear, and it just comes down to do we want to pay crazy prices for squad players, which seems to be the only way to get him these days. Thiago, that's right, Darby. Thiago, perhaps the ultimate steady midfielder who scored one of the most amazing goals you'll ever see against Manchester United. And everybody, the best part about that goal is still everybody's reaction to that goal, including Mourinho on the sideline, who just couldn't believe it. This is the guy who signed Thiago, and he just barely could believe it that he scored that goal against Manchester United. And we still have obviously Bakayoko, who's was in the stands alongside Hazard, neither of whom are fit to play yet. So when they both return, the squad will look a lot better, because right now, obviously, we're a little thin. But those two guys will add tremendously. Certainly, they're both expected to be starters for the rest of the season, if and when they do come back. So, obviously, Hazard, who's the centerpiece to this whole Chelsea operation these days, and we haven't seen him play at all this season thanks to his broken ankle. So, it's all everything. There's some conditions that need to be attached to some of these performances where we haven't seen Hazard come back. We'll be alright for the start of the season, says Ralph. Just a bad day. Bakayoko and Conte will be fire. Not so sure about Cesc. Well, I think when Bakayoko is back to being healthy, we're going to go back to the same plan that we operated under last year, with Bakayoko basically being the replacement for Matic. So Conte and Bakayoko would be your first choice, and then Fabregas comes on as a second half substitute, either to help see out the game or help get a late winner, all that usual stuff, and then they can rotate. And then when the fourth midfielder, this mystery fourth midfielder, would be helpful, would be in League Cups and other games that we don't necessarily care about as much. Do you think it was a red card against Pedro, says Juan? I think it's a little harsh. I can see why it was given. It's a slight tackle from behind and got him right on the Achilles, which is a pretty bad place to tackle. So I mean, in isolation, I'm fine with the red card. It's just that good old referee was not consistent in his decisions, and I'm of the firm belief that there are no good and no bad referees. They're inconsistent and consistent referees, and Bobby Madley was not consistent today. If you're gonna send Pedro off for that, then surely you need to give 2 yellow cards at least to Bellerin. That sort of stuff. Just it makes it unfortunate, I guess. And the yellow card that Madley gave to Willian for having the temerity to be tripped by Bellerin and then falling over in the penalty area was not necessarily his most shining moment. And then I think he went over to Conte at some point too, because Conte was not very happy with the Pedro red card and told Conte to calm down, and then just looked all smug about it. So I have a particular dislike for Bobby Madley today, but it is what it is. Florian says, "How do you think we'll play without Pedro and Hazard?" Well, I think unless there's been new developments, I'm pretty sure Pedro's available for next weekend, because this is a friendly, despite what other people are saying. It is a friendly, and suspensions and stuff like that doesn't carry over and does not count. So my assumption is that Pedro will be available, as will be Willian, and I'm fairly happy and confident that Pedro, Willian, and whoever starts at center forward, either Batshuayi or Morata, will be fine. Yeah, Derby says straight red, he'll miss it. So that's what they were saying, but I've yet to see that actually be confirmed. So on the telecast, an initial report said Pedro will miss it because it's a straight red card, so it's a one-match ban. That's what I've seen, and then I saw that debunked almost straight away. So I suppose we'll find out in the next few hours, unless in the last 20 minutes there's been official confirmation one way or the other. What about Pedro's injury? I don't think Pedro's injured. He got a cramp in his hamstring right when he made that tackle. Even if Pedro's available, says Florian, we're still incredibly thin, unless of course Musonda will play, but my guess he'll go out on loan again. Well, I'm not debating that we're thin at the moment. I think that one is fairly obvious. Both Conte's been talking about it for who knows how long, most of the summer. Most of Chelsea's briefings to the likes of the Telegraph also talk about the squad being thin and wanting to sign more players. But as we see with somebody like Drinkwater, it's not exactly easy to sign squad players these days. Musonda, particularly or specifically about him, he seems to be, I think, on course to stay with the team. He certainly seems to be ahead of Boga, and that puts him third choice as the attacking midfield after Pedro and Willian. And even when Hazard comes back, that only bumped Musonda down to fourth choice, and we need 4 players for 2 positions. So I think Musonda got his number 17. So I think Musonda will be staying, and maybe we'll actually trust the youth at some point. Troy is not happy with Morata. He says he held everyone on for the goal and couldn't put a penalty kick on goal. Disappointing. Yeah, it's just one game. He'll be fine, I think. It seems Morata seems like if you haven't seen it, there's a really good profile of him written by Sid Lowe for The Guardian. And basically it says Morata is a complete player, complete striker, as long as he can develop a bit of a mean streak. He seems perhaps a bit too nice. So he needs to find that inner beast and step up to fill the Costa shoes. So that's possibly where Morata's lacking. Maybe a bit of killer instinct, whatever. I don't know. He might have missed his penalty kick and didn't do too well on that free kick. But I would be more concerned about players not marking players, like defenders not marking the other guys on the free kick, rather than Morata dropping off a bit too much. So if Rudiger and Moses are in position, in proper position, to cover Kolasinac and whoever the other guy was, it doesn't really matter how deep Morata drops. So, blame whoever we want, I suppose. Chelsea have to look for a better striker than Morata. Yeah, that's not happening. We just spent 58 million plus on Morata, so he's our man, and have to make it work with him and Batshuayi, I think. Yes, and Morata needs someone like Hazard to free him, says Prince. I think, obviously Chelsea play better with Hazard in the team than without Hazard, and that's not something we've seen just yet. Loic Remy, the savior. That's right. Let's not forget about Loic Remy, the current third striker. Pedro, 1 game or 3? Back to the Pedro thing. I'm still maintaining that it's 0 because it's a friendly. It might be 1. It's definitely not 3. If there is a suspension that carries over because it was a straight red card, then it's 1 game. But I haven't seen this rule anywhere other than mentioned on the telecast. So that's all I know. Antonio must settle his differences with Costa. I think the Costa train is long gone. That's all bridges have been burned. This is what we have. It's Morata and Batshuayi and maybe a third striker if we sign somebody like Llorente. I don't know. It's a problem if you can't play properly without Hazard, says Kelvin. And that's probably not wrong. Unfortunately, it's kind of like every team at some point has to be built around a player or two. Like Barcelona is not the same without Messi. City is not the same without Silva. I don't know, whoever is their centerpiece these days. De Bruyne. It's there's only so many. If we had a 1-to-1 replacement for Hazard, then that would be pretty amazing, but they probably would not be trading off. They would both be playing. So, I guess we need somebody to step up. The problem is, if Hazard's not playing, we need somebody like Willian or Pedro or Fabregas or previously Costa to step up. Now, Costa was able to do that several times. We have not seen that... and we saw that from Willian every once in a while, but we didn't really see it today. We've seen it from Pedro a couple times last season. Didn't quite see it today. Fabregas was actually fairly anonymous and a little ineffective in defense, but that's something we know about Fabregas. He didn't seem to have his customary impact on the attacking side. So that's a bit unfortunate. But it is what it is. Why must Conte allow Courtois to play penalty kick when Fabregas is on the field? Well, I think again it's because we didn't necessarily care about this penalty shootout that much, and we possibly wanted to get some players in there, or other players volunteer to take it, and because they don't usually get to take a penalty. Somebody like Cahill or Courtois, who are not among our regular penalty takers, were first 2 up. So maybe they want a little practice. What about Bale as a first team player? Sure, that could be interesting, but I don't know. I don't think Gareth Bale is coming to Chelsea. That seems about as unrealistic as Alex Sandro, unfortunately. We need to sign more players, especially wingbacks. Well, for sure, says Philip. And I think the squad is thin, so we need several players. 3 or 4, it seems to be the number that's being thrown about. And it's August 6th, and the transfer window closes on the 31st. So we have 3.5 weeks to get 3.5 players. That's considering how quickly we seem to not be able to get things done. That's not necessarily a good look, but we did get two transfers on transfer deadline day last season, who turned out to be crucial to the whole enterprise last season. So it's a fallback option. Prefer not to hold our business to deadline day, but if we have to, then we have to. Do we have money issues in this market with the stadium, says Troy? I don't think the stadium necessarily is impacting the money issues. I think we just have money issues because of the market itself. It's when every halfway decent player costs 40 to 50 million. I'm not sure Chelsea have really made our peace with this reality yet. I think the two teams who have made peace with it are Manchester City and Manchester United. Especially United just signed Matic, obviously, for 40 million. That's an outrageous price to pay for a 29-year-old midfielder who may not be at the peak of his powers anymore, to put it sort of in a waffly, uncommitted sentence. Matic has seen better days, I'd say. He was good last season, and he was, amazing for that 12-month period in about 2015. But his price was still 40 million, and sure, there's a bit of tax there because it's rival to rival, but that's still an outrageous transfer. City, who now obviously have paid upwards of 130 million for 3 players for the same position, basically, right wing back, left wing back. So it's I think it's one of these where you kind of have to adjust to the new paradigm, and the new paradigm is where once 20 million transfers were looked at as outrageous and then became commonplace, and then 30 that went up to 30 million, and now every squad player has any bit of reputation is going to be 40 million pounds. So if we need 3 or 4 more players, that's another 150 million, 160 million that need to be invested into the team. I think Chelsea have the money to do that. It's just trying to make peace with spending that money, and I think that's where the hang-up is at the board level. I think Conte has kind of made his peace with it. He's always talked since being at Chelsea. Conte has always talked about making the right players or signing the right players for the right positions and at the right price. And that latter part, that right price, seems to not be such a big concern for him anymore. I'm just trying to read between the lines of what he's saying in public, but he seems to be trending more towards let's just get some players in at whatever cost, rather than the right cost for the right players. Make sure we sign the right players, but if we have to pay outrageous amounts, we have to pay outrageous amounts. And I suppose that's where some of this reported tension can be imagined. I really don't think there's tension necessarily in the classic tension sense between Conte and the board. I think everybody seems to be recognizing just fine what the issues are, namely that we don't have a big enough squad. And everybody's working towards that same goal. Conte may be a step ahead in terms of this whole pricing transfer market reality these days. So if there's any tension, it's possibly there. But I think we will eventually we will sign somebody, I'm sure, for the rest of this month. And hopefully they'll turn out to be just as good as David Luiz and Marcus Alonso, and not like Papi Djilobodji and Michael Hector. So that's if you're looking for parallels between the summer of 2016 or 2015 and the summer of 2017, perhaps that's where the pudding's gonna be. Are we gonna spend the rest of the month signing the Djilobodjis and the Hectors of the world, or are we gonna go and sign somebody tremendously good, like David Luiz. So I guess that's something to watch out for. Chuck's here. Chuck says Ox, another squad midfielder, another forward. I think Oxlade-Chamberlain would be a tremendous signing, and I hope we actually do push for him. The versatility, he was playing left wing back today. Can play midfield, left, right, whatever you want, and that's precisely what the squad needs. Somebody to fill in the holes and the gaps when we have them, and somebody who can do that well, and with pace and with power. One thing that really stood out for the first 15 minutes, now they couldn't really keep this up, but one thing that really stood out in the first 15 minutes was just how fast and how quick Arsenal were, and that's not something that Chelsea seemed to be able to cope with at all. Obviously, pace is a big killer, and if you ever played any video games like FIFA, then pace is king. But it's also true in real life, and there's not much answer for pace. Somebody like Mohamed Salah made a career out of being super fast. Theo Walcott, all these guys. And Arsenal certainly looked super quick and super fast and pretty strong first 15 minutes. And that included Oxlade-Chamberlain. So hopefully, he still hasn't signed a contract. He rejected the latest contract from Arsenal. So, somebody. Chuck says Oxford 40 million is a good price. Yeah, it's 40 million is the standard rate, and Oxlade-Chamberlain is possibly better than an average standard player. So 40 million for him. We have to pay it. It's we need players that Conte can trust. Unfortunately, he doesn't seem to be trusting the youth. For the fans of the youth players, for others, it's understandable because we're trying to compete on 4 different levels or 4 different competitions. So it needs to. We cannot. We managed to navigate the treacherous seas of the Premier League last season with 13 players. And we can't really do that again this year, especially since possibly those 13 players are not as good as we were last season. The book's obviously out on Morata, whether he's as good as Costa was. We haven't seen Bakayoko play at all. Matic had his detractors, but Matic was solid and steady. So we don't know how Bakayoko will compare to him. And as I was saying earlier, something weird's going on with Alonso, where he is unable to complete a full game at this point, and that's a week from the season. It's not exactly unconcerning. So yeah, there's work to do, work to be done on the training field, training pitch, and there's work to be done in the transfer market. Conte's responsibility is the former. He'll try to get the players to improve the system. We possibly should be concerned about the fact that the 3-4-3 system seems to be able to be neutralized by another team playing 3-4-3 and playing it better, which makes sense. Fight fire with fire and do it better. So a separate system, something to like a 3-5-2 or whatever, needs to be developed alongside the current strategies, and that we can switch to it. Obviously, the red card didn't help today. We did play a 3-5-1 for the last 10 minutes with Musonda sliding into an advanced midfield role. But yeah. Let's go for some good news. Loftus-Cheek is looking good, playing with a back 3. Tammy's banging goals. Yeah, Tammy Abraham unfortunately picked up a slight injury too. So he might miss actually Swansea's game next weekend. Yeah, Loftus-Cheek, if you haven't seen it, I didn't watch the game, but he did play one tremendous pass. So the narrative was that if he was Paul Pogba, we would all be hearing about it. One of those outside of the foot curling passes into the path of the right winger. There's a really famous pass that Lampard played like that once too. So yeah, happy to see Loftus-Cheek play, and hopefully that continues for him because we need to. After all these years of Loftus-Cheek hanging around the first team, we actually need to find out just how good of a player he is. And apparently, the only way we were going to do that is by sending him on loan. So hopefully, who's the manager? Frank de Boer will come through and play Loftus-Cheek a lot, and he'll turn out to be amazing. Kelvin says we've loaned out 25 players and the team is lacking in depth. That sounds weird. Yes, unfortunately, it would appear that Conte doesn't necessarily trust any of those players that we loaned out, or there's a longer-term plan. But yeah, it's an interesting look. But we should be familiar or comfortable by now with having 30 plus loanees out. And there's always a fresh supply of young talent coming in, and some of the older loanees have left, like Chalobah and Ake. So it's a rotation. Yeah, Conte wanted to play Loftus-Cheek as a striker, where he's good in a Lampard position. That's right. Loftus-Cheek was our second or third striker for most of the season last year, which probably not his best position. So hopefully he gets plenty of time in midfield. Do you think our subs and the penalty kick lineup were a help message from Conte to the board? Asked Troy. I mean, I guess you can look at it that way, but I don't think Conte needs to resort to these sort of antics to get his point across. That's just my thinking. From what I've heard and what I've seen reported or whatever, Conte said this himself. His communication with the board is good. I don't see why he would need to sabotage. Basically, we're asking him is if he's sabotaging himself as a winner. He likes to win everything, right? Are we asking that? Is he sabotaging his chances of winning this game to like spur the board into action? Which, I mean, I guess he could be. I think certainly something I wouldn't put past somebody like Mourinho, but I don't think Conte needs to do that. I think everybody is on the same page, so to speak. We're working towards the right goals and the same goals and the right aims. Perhaps not as successfully as we would like, thus leading to frustrations on Conte's part, on the fans' part, etc. But I don't think, just throwing a game or making a joke out of the penalty kick shootout, if that's what we think was. I just can't see how Courtois takes penalty kicks, says Troy. I think it's a preseason special, like when he did it against PSG a few years ago. Courtois knows he's never going to take a penalty kick like in a competitive match unless it goes to like 11 or 12. So he probably jumped up at his chance. Probably Cahill did the same thing, He said they volunteered and they said, I'm never ever going to take a penalty kick for Chelsea in a competitive game. Let me take one now. And Cahill came through and Courtois got a little excited and blasted it well over. Conte also says he's satisfied. He doesn't like to say negative things. Yeah, it's a pretty standard stuff from football managers where you keep it positive and put a positive spin on things in a post-match press conference because the press is gonna blow everything out of proportion. Even if you say neutral things, it's gonna be bad and negative and palpable discord and rows and blazing rows, etc., etc. Aw, Troy Down says I'm boring. Sorry, boss. You just got wrong directions, Troy says he's under. This is a comedy channel. No. The comedy is reserved for penalty kick shootouts when Courtois takes one, or Gary Cahill. All right. We've descended into silliness here. It's supposed to be serious. This is serious business. This is preseason. This counts. All right. Well, you've put up with my boringness here. Oh, it was a big question. Big question from Hud? H-U-D. Do you think Chelsea can win the Premier League? Yes, I think we can. Will we? Don't ask me that. I think we can. It's I think anybody in the top 6 at the moment, certainly preseason, has a chance. Maybe except Arsenal. Plus Arsenal can't win it now because they won the Community Shield, so their trophy haul is done. And as we talked at the beginning, was it 2010? The last time the Community Shield winner went on to win the Premier League. But yeah, like every season, there's going to be a battle for the top 4, and then 2 teams are going to miss out, and they are going to drop into the Europa League, and they will not be happy. But this seems to be the new reality of the Premier League. Only so many teams can make the Champions League. Maybe they should expand it to 6 so we can all be happy. Everybody spends 200-300 million, but only one team can win it at the end. Last season was tough. Conte says this will be even tougher, and I kind of believe him, especially with the current threadbare squad we got. But we can. I think there's certainly several, if not many, proven winners in the squad. When Chelsea won the league in 2015, Mourinho accused a lot of these players of, well, maybe not accused is the wrong word, but then, so they won the league and said, all right, we're winners. And then Mourinho said, yeah, but now we have to be serial winners. These guys aren't serial winners yet. Well, now, that blip, the 10th place aside, is 2 wins out of 3 in 2 years. So, it's people like Azpilicueta, Cahill, Luiz, Fabregas, Willian. These players know how to win. That counts for something in the season ahead. So hopefully those are not necessarily great things to rely on heading into the season, but I do think it does give us a fighting chance in the season ahead. And that's before we get some hopefully some quality signings. Anyway, what's my name? My name is David, and I write for We Ain't Got No History, the greatest Chelsea blog in all the lands. So be sure to check us out there. This is a good way to end this professional ending to this video over here. So yeah, Chelsea did not win the Community Shield. I'm not so sure we will ever be able to move past this tragedy. Arsenal will get to enjoy their little celebration of the plate, and hopefully we'll best them the next time. It's unfortunate to lose to Arsenal again at Wembley, although technically we drew and then we lost on the ABBA karaoke. So now the preseason is done finally, for sure. All the friendlies are done. Everything counts from here on out. And for Chelsea, the first game will be against Burnley next weekend on Saturday. Next weekend, Burnley. And hopefully we will put all this preseason nonsense behind us and get off to a winning start. So unless something major happens in the week ahead, we will talk to you after that game. Thanks for watching. Thanks for commenting. Even you, Troy Downs, with your silliness. And we'll chat with you next weekend. Thanks for watching. Bye.